Are you ready? Hi everyone, this is Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I'm here today thanks to our sponsor Madeline Turnipseed to do the video you have been waiting for. I am going to dye with Jacquard Acid Dyes for the very first time. Woohoo! Yay! The crowd erupts. Or, you know, I'm talking to myself. But I am really excited to use the Jacquard Acid Dye stocks that I just created. I will be using some of these 1% dye stock solutions and doing some low immersion dyeing or medium immersion dyeing of some yarn. So I have 8 cups of water in my dye pot, and I'm going to add a little over 2 tablespoons of white vinegar to the water. I don't really know what proportions I should be using with the acid dyes. This is the first time I've tried this, and you know, I'm kind of winging it, but I wanted to try to get a feel of how these dyes absorb to the fiber myself in the pot before I try hand painting or something. So we are going to dye 2 skeins of yarn. We're going to dye 100 grams of stroll fingering and 100 grams of wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn. The stroll fingering yarn is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and the wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn is 100% Peruvian highland wool. So the first thing I need to do is arrange my yarns in the pot. So I kind of have them together, and I guess I'm going to have the ends over here-ish, kind of looped around each other. I did pre-soak the yarn, and so it's all in the pot. I'm not expecting to get identical colorways because they're not quite identically arranged in here, but I'm hoping that, well, I don't know if we'll see anything that will be like, ooh, this is a difference between superwash and untreated yarn, but we should get something pretty exciting. Madeline Turnipseed, thank you so much for sponsoring this video. I'm really excited to dye this yarn, and I hope that we will both love the results. We are going to use 3 different acid dye colors today. We are going to use jet black, violet, and silver gray. And as I said, I mixed these dye stocks up, these 1% dye stocks, earlier today. And so now I'm going to pour approximately 200 milliliters of each color into one of these containers. And I had pre-measured, and so I know that 200 milliliters on this cup goes just a little bit below the ridge. So this is the black. I'm curious also about how well these containers, there we go, pour. So my work surface, since I've been mixing dye stocks today, is still covered with, yikes, you can see the dye that came out from my spill. I'll have to remember to wipe this down. My work surface is still covered with plastic wrap, so that way I don't really need to worry too much about the spills. Okay, so that was the black. With the violet, I'm just going to pour into my measuring cup. Okay. Alright, maybe I'm going to want to keep like paper towel on hand to help with drips and splatter. But it's funny, with the violet I noticed that it looks very blue at first, but then starts looking more purple once it's diluted. So, and this is the silver gray. I don't really know if I am using, whoops, way too much dye or what. I do know that it's a bit more stressful to have to pour from these stock solution jars than it is to just use food coloring and drip directly into a container. But when we see on the paper towel, the gray does look nice and gray. I was curious if it would end up looking more black right off the bat. But so that's something that is kind of cool. And so now, as my labels peel off, oh joy. So now I'm gonna clean up a bit, hopefully remember what color is where, and then we will get ready as the pot heats up to add our dye to the dye bath. So I don't know a lot about what to expect here. I don't really know how quickly the dyes will strike, how far they'll move out, how much white we'll see on the bottom, whether my proportion of vinegar to water to yarn is good. These are all things that we will learn as time goes on. Right now, I feel very much like a newbie again. It's like the first time I've tried something like this. So my sense of what proportions and volumes and whatnot work is not as good as it is with food coloring. But we're at a simmer, low simmer. I'm going to reduce the heat and add the first of our dyes. So it would have been nice, I think, if the dyes were a bit more concentrated. But I'm going to add, my goal is to be adding this purple kind of like in a line down the center. But yeah, this is just a lot of volume. Especially for low immersion type stuff. You know, when I'm dyeing with food coloring and low immersion, maybe I'm adding, you know, less than half a cup of water, but 200 mils is, you know, I would say closer to like 2/3 of a cup, and I'm doing this 3 times. So there's our purple. I'm kind of giving it a bit of like a minute or something to settle before I add the black. I'll raise the heat up again. All right, so here I think this is the black. But see, maybe my initial volume of water is a little high, because you can see it mixing kind of down a bit. I've only added about half of it so far. All right, I'm gonna kind of just let that go. I still have some more black that I can add in a little while. I think that I probably should have started off with a smaller volume of water, but it does look like the dye has kind of absorbed the fiber pretty quickly, except for the black, where I definitely see some in the water over there. Okay, and now before I lose my cool, ooh, hey, I see some purple coming up down on this end. So things are spreading out. Let's add some of this gray. Yeah, there's just, I think, way too much water in here for it to really count as low immersion. There's too much water over the top. All right, I'm going to let this go for 5 minutes before we give it a poke. I still have some more black and gray that I can add, but let's give this a shot to kind of like absorb a bit, and then we'll see if we need to add some more color. 6 minutes have passed since I left you, and let's take a look. So actually, that section looks very black, but check out the water. Right here, there's more color, but even over the purple as well. Let's kind of move this a bit to give that dye access to that side. Let's see over here. Okay. Of course, I'm not wearing gloves right now, but it looks like we might be getting some good penetration to the bottom of the pot. The place where I'll be really curious is about this purple, how far that penetrates and how much white we have left. I guess I don't want to move stuff around too much, but I should also put my gloves back on. Alright, I think this is our gray. I hope this is our gray, or else I might be sad. Let's add some Yeah, this is our gray. Add the rest of that gray. Oh. Then I need to decide about the black. I guess I might want to add a tiny bit more black to this spot. And maybe back here. You want to use all that dye I pulled out. We'll see if we get something that actually looks like a true black and how much white is left in here. Those are the two, I guess, biggest questions that I have over this experiment. So I think I'm going to let this sit for 10 minutes and then we'll come back and see, you know, what, like if it looks like most of the dye is absorbed or what. So it has been 10 minutes since I added the additional dyes. And I'm still seeing some black over there. Got, you know, there's still a little bit of purple. The gray and the purple seem to have dissolved pretty well. I'm going to move the yarn a bit to give a little more access to the black, but I'm curious about what's going on down here. So it looks like, oh cool, I see some paler colors. I don't know, I don't really want the black to spread too much over there. You know, this is all new, and I think that maybe what I'm gonna do, because you can certainly wait for all the dye to absorb. I don't know if all the dye will absorb, but I think that, you know, the RIT dyes, not everything absorbed, and so here I know you can exhaust acid dyes, but all right, we're gonna see what's gonna happen, and I will let this sit another 10 minutes, and then I will remove the yarn from the pot. So it's been an additional 10 minutes since I stopped filming, and the heat is still on, and looks like our dyes, it's a little purplish, but there's a hint of color in there, but a lot of the color has cleared. So I'm now going to turn off the pot, and I'm gonna you can see I'm hesitating because I'm debating between whether or not I should let the yarn cool off in the pot a bit or if I should remove it from the pot so it can cool off a bit faster. And I think that I want to try to remove the yarn from the pot so we can see, oof, wow. Most of that color is in the yarn. That's not very much color in there at all. And I do see, well, I can't quite tell if it's white or paler grays, but let me move this to, got a basin right here. Okay, here's the yarn that I just removed from the pot. And wow, okay, there's some white. Is that, I think that that's might just be the, that might just be the stroll yarn. Interesting. I am very, very curious. Oh no, it looks like there's some light patches in both. Okay, I think that this is really cool. I'm gonna let this cool completely before we get ready to wash the yarn. But right now, I guess some of this black right here almost looks a little brown, but some of this also looks very, very black. I think some of the purple spread, the gray, you know, there might be some charcoal gray or pale purple. It's a little hard to tell right now, but I think that for the first try, this was pretty awesome. Especially if we look back at the pot. I mean, when we dyed with RIT dyes, the dye bath never ever got this clear. So almost all of the dye that we added is in our yarn, which is awesome. So we're getting ready to wash our Jacquard dyed yarn. So I'm going to add a little bit of clear dish soap to my wash basin. Now I'm going to add in our yarns. And I'm using cool tap water right now. And yarns in. Yep. So the dye bath is looking kind of grayish, so something is rinsing out, but it looks like the majority of the color is left in the yarn. I have no idea how many rinses this will take, but my gut feeling says this will already be better than RIT dyes. But of course, I think almost anything would be better than the RIT dyes. But if you look at the pan I put them in, I mean, there's no evidence of dye on there when I took it out of the stove. So I think we've got really, really good penetration onto the yarn. Yeah, and that's already looking a little bit clearer already. Yeah, maybe not quite, but still, compared to how dark the dyes are, this is great. I'm going to keep washing this and rinsing it. And if there's anything noticeable or unusual that I notice about these rinses, I'll add a touch more soap, I will come back and let you know. But otherwise, I'll hang these yarns up to dry and show you our finished dried yarns once everything is dry. These yarns are amazing. And if I didn't know that I used some low immersion dyeing techniques, I would think that they were almost hand painted because of the regular spacing of colors on here. I guess one other clue is that we almost get some speckling in our stroll yarn. Look at some of these patches of color around even the black. But oh yeah, the black. You guys, we have black yarn. How long have we been wanting to try for a black yarn? In the 100% wool yarn, some of the areas read a little brown, like over here and a little bit in here. But we still have patches that are undeniably, remarkably black. In the stroll yarn, all of the black sections read as very, very black. And I'm happy that the blacks are very distinct from the grays, and that this silver gray color that we used actually kind of gives like a really nice tone. And I'm not sure if we were to dilute the black, if it would read as gray or brown or what, but I'm just so excited to see these colors. The Jacquard Violet actually reads a little blue. I look at it and I think, that's sort of blue. But then when I compare it against something that's blue, then it starts to look more purple to me. Like, there, that's something that's blue. And next to that, it looks a lot more purple. But if you stare at it on its own, it starts to almost read like a deep royal blue. So it's a very, very blue purple. But, I'm so excited. Here's one of the examples of some of the almost speckling that we see in the stroll yarn. And almost some reverse speckling where we see tiny patches of white around the colors. So I think that these specks are coming from rates of absorption of the dye to the yarn and it just absorbing really quickly to certain sections versus there being some dye that some particles that weren't dissolved to add the specks, because most of the speckling seems to be from patches of white versus patches of dye. And I think that that is just so cool. So what do I think about commercial acid dyes? I think that they're awesome. I love, love, love finally being able to achieve black and gray. These are two colors that I love, so it's nice to finally be able to play around with them. It's also really nice to have a purple that doesn't break. Even though breaking violet is one of my favorite dyeing techniques ever, it's nice to be able to just kind of have a nice easy purple. So I am really excited to try dip dyeing with this Jacquard Violet. The dye bath didn't exhaust completely, but maybe they will in the future. Technique-wise, using the Jacquard Acid Dyes is very similar to what I've done with food coloring. So I'm excited to explore these dyes with a lot of my other favorite application techniques. I'm not necessarily a fan of having to make stock solutions ahead of time. I know that you can mix the powders up right before you want to use them, but a lot of food colorings start in a non-powder state at the beginning, so that's just a little bit easier to deal with. But I think that overall, these acid dyes are really easy to use, and so I'm not quite sure what was so intimidating about them. As long as you have some dedicated equipment, which really you need a pot, a spoon, and maybe a bowl or plate, then you can start dyeing. The one thing that is encouraging me to continue to make stock solutions versus go directly from the powder is just that once you have the dye in a stock solution, it is really safe to handle in your home. And even the bottles say that children can use these dyes when they're in liquid form. It's just when they're in powder form, the risks of inhalation and the irritant from inhaling these fine powders means that you should wear some kind of dust mask while you are using the powders. Madeline Turnipseed, thank you so much for sponsoring this video. I had a blast with this first time trying out Jacquard Acid Dyes, and I really cannot wait to explore these more. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you guys for tuning in for this episode of Dyepot Weekly. If you enjoyed what you saw today, make sure you subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. I release a new video every week, and frequently we'll do live streams with spinning, dyeing yarn, or even sometimes some chats and sneak peeks for content that will be coming up on the channel. Thanks for watching!